The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it is a great pleasure to be able to bring this debate to the House this evening, and it's a particular joy that it's come so early, because it means I've got 2 hours to talk about my favourite subject, Mr Deputy Speaker, and that is, of course, Cornwall. I think the whole House will be aware that I view Cornwall as a very, very special place, a unique place in many ways, and I always count it an incredible privilege, the fact that I was born and raised there. I have lived and worked there my whole life. I have raised my own family there, and now I have the joy of seeing my grandchildren grow up there as well. And clearly I'm not the only one who views it as a very special and wonderful place, because we're seeing many people, significant numbers of people, choosing to move to Cornwall to live in recent years, and of course around 5 million people every year come there on holiday. And it's very easy to have that image of Cornwall as a wonderful place to go on holiday, and all of the picture postcard images that we have, and not understand that actually behind many of those images, individuals, households and indeed businesses face a number of very real challenges. We face challenges being a relatively low-income economy with higher than average house prices, and a number of other factors which do make life challenging for many people. But it isn't just households and businesses that actually face challenges in Cornwall. It is actually those who seek to deliver our public services as well. And I think we would all agree in this place that funding for public services should basically be based on 2 factors, and that is the need or the demand for that service, but then also the cost of delivering that service locally. And I hope just to present to the Minister, who I'm very pleased to see in his place this evening, and present to the Minister this evening some issues that we face in Cornwall that I believe are actually unique to Cornwall, or particularly the combination of those factors are unique to Cornwall, and therefore mean that we face a number of very real and very unique challenges when it comes to delivering public services in Cornwall. And there is a need, I believe, to review and reflect on those challenges when it comes to the allocation of funding for our services in Cornwall. I will give way.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the honourable member for securing this important debate. As a fellow South West MP, I know what the honourable member is referring to is reflected also in Somerset. Somerset Council is struggling to provide discretionary public services it wishes to do because of the current unfair funding method. In the last financial year, rural councils could only budget £77 per head on discretionary services, while urban areas spent more than double this. Does the honourable member agree with me that more needs to be done to provide our rural constituents with the services that they deserve?
I thank the honourable lady for that intervention. I wonder if she actually read the subject of the debate tonight, because the debate tonight is very specifically about delivering public services and funding public services in Cornwall. She can make her points in her own debate about her part of the world. I'm here particularly to talk about Cornwall this evening. As I was saying, I think there is a need to reflect on these challenges and this combination of factors that we face in Cornwall when it comes to the funding that we receive for our public services. The first point I want to make is geography. Cornwall does have a unique geography within the British Isles. We are a very long and narrow peninsula, unlike any other part of the country. We are almost an island. I've said in this place before that if the River Tamar was 2.5 miles longer, we would actually be an island, and as many proud Cornishmen as thought about taking their shovel and finishing the job and creating us as an island. And the challenges we face often have more in common with an island than it would with a part of the mainland. I see the honourable gentleman from Stamford wanting to intervene. I'll happily give way.
The honourable gentleman will adhere to the subject of the debate.
Mr Davies Speaker, I hope that you'll be impressed by just how much significance and interest it is and ties in with the Honourable Gentleman. Can I first of all congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for Austell and Newquay for bringing this forward. The Honourable Member is my Gaelic cousin, and he's my Gaelic cousin, which means, and a full cousin, and as such I believe that his interests are similar to my own. Has the Honourable Gentleman ever considered working with other regions in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to help address the matter of public services funding? Our Gaelic cousins in Wales, in Scotland and of course in Northern Ireland, we are united by culture, by history, by language, with mutual interests. Does the Honourable Member agree that our Gaelic strength is better within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
It's a nice try, but this is an intervention, not a speech. Steve.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Strangford. And he actually makes a very good point that I'll probably come on to later, that actually Cornwall does share a great deal in common with the what gets called the Celtic fringe of the United Kingdom. And also, to pick up his point about working together, there is a group of local authorities called Britain's Leading Edge, which represents those areas on the coastal fringe of England, who do work together because we recognise that the challenges that coastal areas face have some similarities across the country, and clearly there's a lot in common that we can share. But having said that, I do believe, particularly in Cornwall, you know, our coastline is unique. We are almost an island. We only have one neighbour in Devon, and I know we enjoy a bit of banter with Devon from time to time, but they are our only mainland neighbour, and that impacts on the delivery of services, because if you are a county within the middle of England, you're surrounded by other local authorities, other police forces, other fire services, other health services that you can share resources with, and if you have a particular challenge in your area, then you can draw on services from those surrounding counties to actually come and help you with the challenges and the specific incident that you face. We don't have that in Cornwall, and therefore we have to provide our own resilience in most of Cornwall because there is no one else nearby to come and help. And I'm not sure that always gets understood by government, and certainly doesn't seem to get reflected when it comes to funding allocation. We have the longest coastline in Cornwall, 422 miles. I've not walked all of it yet, but I've walked a great deal of it over the years. We have literally hundreds of small coastal communities. Nowhere in Cornwall is more than 25 miles from the sea, and actually the vast majority of people live an awful lot closer than that to the sea. And the fact is that it just is common sense, isn't it, that if you're delivering a public service in a coastal community, you don't have as big a population, you don't have as much land for people to live on in order to deliver that service to. Therefore, you need more sites. We by definition, need more schools and health facilities and police offices and fire stations, because we've got a smaller area for that particular station or facility to service. That means it costs more to deliver those services on a coastal area like Cornwall. And as I said, I'm not sure, and I've tried to make this point throughout my time in this place, I'm not sure that point and the particular challenge that Cornwall faces in delivering services because of our geography and being a narrow peninsula really gets appreciated and certainly reflected in the funding formula. But it's not only the fact that we're a coastal area, we're also a rural area. Cornwall Council is the second biggest by land mass of any local authority in the country, 1,375 square miles. And yet we have a relatively small population of just over 500,000 people. We have no towns with a population over 25,000. And in fact, nearly 50%, and nearly half of all people who live in Cornwall live in communities of less than 3,000. And this rurality and sparsity presents real challenges when it comes to delivering service because of the additional travelling that has to take place. Our police have to travel further, our fire engines have to travel further to reach these communities. School travel is a very big challenge that we face in Cornwall, of actually getting pupils, particularly pupils with special needs, with such large areas to cover, to get those children who have special educational needs to the facilities we have, it means them travelling much, much further. Adult social care is a huge challenge we face, partly because of the reality and being a long, narrow peninsula and the distance that the domiciliary care workers have to travel to reach all of those that need their services. Now, about 10 years ago, we thought we had won a big victory when it comes to funding for rural services, particularly within the local government, because the government recognised this after a great deal of pressure and arguing from rural MPs from rural constituencies, and the government introduced the Rural Services Delivery Grant. And this was really the first time that we had seen corrected the sort of emphasis under the Labour government, where most of the money went into urban areas and densely populated areas, because they seem to think that's the only places that deprivation took place. And an acknowledgement that rural areas have particular needs and particular costs in delivering those services. Now, unfortunately, although we won the argument in principle, when it comes to allocation of money, it was dampened down and we didn't get as much as we should have got. And despite the last 10 years, we've never really fully put that right. And that's something that I would suggest to the Minister and to the Government. We really, really do look at it. I know many rural authorities, and Cornwall is certainly one of them right now, that with the current proposed local government settlement grant is going to face huge, huge challenges. And one of the ways we could correct that is by putting the Rural Services Delivery Grant to the level that it really should be, rather than the dampened down level. We've also been promised a review of police funding in rural areas, but it hasn't yet happened. And actually, sadly, during that time, the gap for Cornwall has actually got bigger. We were 9p per person below the average. We've now dropped to 10p per person below the average in terms of funding. And therefore, there is a real need to bring forward that review of police funding and make sure that Cornwall gets the funding that it really needs. So these two factors of our coastal, being a coastal community and being a rural community, really put pressure on the delivery of our services in Cornwall, and that needs to be reflected when it comes to funding. The other element to this that I want to mention, again something I've talked about numerous times, is the impact that tourism has on Cornwall. Now, tourism is really important to the Cornish economy. We welcome it. 5 million people a year typically come to Cornwall on holiday, second only to London in the UK in terms of the number of visitors that we welcome every year. And to put in perspective the impact that this does have, I'm privileged to represent the town of Newquay, Cornwall's premier tourist destination, which has a population of about 24,000. But in July and August, we have 200,000 people in any given week in Cornwall. So 8 times the population in tourism when the tourists come in the peak season. And the pressure that puts on our infrastructure and puts on our services cannot be underestimated. We particularly feel that in the pressure on the NHS. We often say in Cornwall that we actually have, in terms of the pressure on the NHS, we have 2 winters every year. We have this time of year where the NHS is under pressure just about everywhere because of seasonal viruses and just the impact that cold weather has on people. And so, great pressure on the NHS in Cornwall at this time of year. But then in the summer, when all of the tourists come, our NHS is also under huge pressure because of the sheer numbers of people that are there. And while actually most hospitals and NHS services around the country have a bit of a respite typically in summer because all of their residents go away on holiday, they all come to Cornwall, so we have to pick up the pressure. And again, I don't think that particularly gets reflected when it comes to funding. We see the demand on our ambulance services in the summer. Is significant. Now, a lot of work has been done in recent years, and I want to acknowledge that through the 111 service, through Pharmacy First that we piloted in Cornwall, in actually getting people to think a bit more smartly about where they need to go to get their treatment and advice on the NHS, rather than turning up at Trelisk or trying to get to see one of our local GPs. And that has certainly helped, but there's no way of avoiding the pressure that we really face on our NHS every summer in Cornwall because of the tourists. Our police face huge pressures in summer. Crime goes up, there are more road traffic accidents, there are more cases of antisocial behaviour, all that the police need to respond to, but doesn't really get reflected in our funding. And probably one of the other areas that, again, I've talked about in a debate just recently, but the impact that tourism has on our housing supply. And the number of Airbnbs we have and the way that that pushes up prices beyond the reach of many people. And what that means is actually we struggle to recruit the people for our public services that we need because they can't afford to buy a house to live there. And particularly in our NHS, when we talk to our NHS managers in Cornwall, they will repeatedly say to us that housing is one of the biggest reasons why they struggle often to recruit the doctors and nurses that they need because they can't find anywhere to live. And you know, the impact that the housing, that tourism has on our housing market is equally significant. And the final factor I want to mention is our demographics. We have a rapidly ageing population in Cornwall. We are currently, our number of elderly people is 6% higher than the UK average. And we have more and more people. The number of over 70s in Cornwall has gone up by 52% in recent years. And some of that is just everyone's getting older, but it's also because people see Cornwall as a great place to retire to. And again, I don't blame them. I want to retire in Cornwall. It is a great place to retire. But with that number of people of retirement age moving to Cornwall, it does put huge pressure, particularly on our health and our social care services. And then the inverse of that is we don't have enough people of working age willing to work in the health and social care sector to provide the services that they need. So the impact that our demographics have is very significant. This year, this financial year, Cornwall Council is going to spend over £250 million on providing adult social care in Cornwall. That is 1/3 of their revenue budget just on social care. And that is only going to increase and become a higher figure as the years go by, and we need that to be reflected in the funding settlements that we are provided with. Now, each of those factors, our geography, the impact of tourism and the impact of having an ageing population, in and of themselves would present significant challenges to Cornwall. But I believe when you factor all of them together and the combined effect of those factors on public services in Cornwall, I believe means we in Cornwall face a unique set of challenges that actually nowhere else in the UK faces to the degree that we face. And that's why I want to make the case, because of that, because of the unique pressures that we face, the unique challenges we face, and the combination of those challenges, that we need to look again at the funding that Cornwall receives and make a special case for Cornwall. Now, the government has already acknowledged that Cornwall is a special place and require special treatment. We referred earlier to the fact that the Cornish have been recognised as a national minority and received protected status as a national minority. In 2014, the Council of Europe recognised Cornish in that way, and the UK government have acknowledged that. And actually, the UK government said this will give the Cornish people the same recognition as the Scots, the Welsh and the Irish within the United Kingdom. And that is very, very welcome. But it doesn't seem to have any impact on government policy when it comes to funding. And I would say if we're going to say that Cornwall is a special place and the Cornish are especially recognised and protected people, that it should have some impact on the way that Cornwall receives its funding. Cornwall was also the first county to receive a devolution deal back in 2015. Again, I believe recognition of the government at that time recognised the particular uniqueness of Cornwall. That devolution deal has recently been upgraded with a new devolution deal. I'm personally disappointed we didn't manage to get a level 3 deal, which I think would have really given Cornwall a great deal more and certainly shifted the focus much more onto Cornwall. I'm disappointed we didn't secure that, but we have had a new level 2 deal And that, again, I believe, is the recognition the government has given to Cornwall. And the other way that the government has recognised the challenges Cornwall faces, particularly with regard to our economy, is through the Shared Prosperity Fund, which has replaced the ERDF European funded programme. And Cornwall received £137 million, far bigger than any other part of the UK, through the Shared Prosperity Fund. And that in itself is a recognition that the government recognises the particular challenges we face in Cornwall, particularly around our economy and growing our economy and upskilling our people. And that's been hugely welcome. We're in the middle of this current round. Projects in my constituency have received significant funding, like the harbour at Charlestown, one of our historic sites, to provide essential infrastructure work there. Newquay has received funding to help support its tourism industry and extend the season in Newquay, which will really help the economy there. And what we've found is that the Shared Prosperity Scheme is much easier to allocate, it's much easier to access than the old ERDF European programmes were, that were hugely bureaucratic and always required match funding. So it's been very, very welcome, the Shared Prosperity Fund that's been provided to Cornwall, and it is now doing a lot of good. But what I would just raise with the Minister is this current round runs out in 2025, and that's going to come round very, very quickly. And so we do need to start to have the conversation and understand what the process is going to be for the allocation of the next round of shared prosperity funding. And I hope the Minister will be able to confirm that the government will continue to recognise the particular and specific challenges that Cornwall faces when it comes to the allocation of that funding in the next round, and continue to support the Cornish economy the way it has done over the last few years. So the challenges that we face in Cornwall, the unique combination of challenges we face, the fact that government does already recognise Cornwall in a number of ways as being special and having very particular challenges, I believe now needs to be also reflected in the way that our public services are funded, particularly our health service, our education, local government funding and police, that we do need to see the true cost of delivering those services in Cornwall reflected in the amount of money that we received. And so I just hope the Minister will have got the message that we do have particular challenges in Cornwall, and that as the government moves forward, it will reflect on these points and continue the conversations with us as MPs from Cornwall, and be able to look again and make sure that Cornwall gets the funding it needs so that the people of Cornwall can get the public services that they deserve.
Cherilyn Mackrory.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank and congratulate my honourable friend and neighbour for bringing this debate. It is so important to my constituents and people across Cornwall. And I don't want to speak for too long, Mr Deputy Speaker. I just want to add a couple of localised meat to the bones, but I am going to disagree with my honourable friend on one point. My honourable friend, the member for St Ives, and I were at a presentation on Friday regarding valuing seafood to the Cornish economy, and one of the points they made, they'd had an economist look at how far away the furthest point from the sea was, and they'd done it with particular precision, and they found that nobody is further than 12 miles away from the sea in Cornwall, so even more coastal than we originally thought. Yeah, on a high tide. But I just want to add a couple of meat to the bones, if I can, on what my honourable friend has said. The NHS funding, my honourable friend set out very, very well. Truro Hospital, the main hospital in my constituency in Truro, is the hub of all the acute needs for Cornwall, and what the NHS is doing particularly well, actually, is trying to spread those services out across the county so that we don't have to have everything happening in Truro. But there are particular challenges in places in my constituency, such as Holywell Bay, right on the north coast, or the Roseland Peninsula on the south coast, where if you're on the Roseland Peninsula in particular, to get an ambulance, it has to go across a ferry before it can get you. That's how remote it is, even though it's very close as the bird flies to somewhere like Falmouth or Truro. Actually, the logistics of getting emergency services there is a real challenge to people who live on that peninsula. And I just want to make one final point, if I may, on the special educational needs funding. Based on provisional funding data for 24-25, Cornwall will receive an annual needs funding per child of £724.14, and this ranks as 142nd lowest funded out of all the statistical neighbours. Local authorities with similar characteristics are due to receive an average of of 78.49 per child per year more than Cornwall. And if Cornwall was to receive the median that everybody else is funding, and by the way, if you're in one of the London boroughs such as Camden or Lewisham or Islington or Westminster, you can expect your high needs child to receive something in the region of £2,500 to £3,000 by comparison. But if Cornwall was to receive the median in that, then actually that would be worth approximately another £5.4 million to the Cornish local authority, and therefore be able to provide a much better service for our children, which primarily, as my honourable friend pointed out, is down to two things. School transport. It's very niche to get a child from those remote places I just said to the school that they need to get to, and also being able to attract the relevant teachers with the housing challenges that I already faced, that we already talked about this evening. So I'll leave it there for colleagues to reflect on, and I join my honourable friend in his pleas to the Treasury, which he articulated so well, that it is a special case in Cornwall. We don't like being called a special case for the wrong reasons, but when you've got water on 3 sides and almost 4 sides, the challenges really are very real. We've got a very competent Conservative-run council in Cornwall, and if they are finding the challenges, then you can guarantee that they are very real indeed. Thank you.
Derek Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with your permission, I'd like to include the Council of the Isles of Scilly, which faces exactly the same kind of challenges. And I'm in a unique position, I think, I am amongst my Cornish colleagues, in that I have 2 unitary authorities seeking to deliver service to my constituents. And I won't seek to speak for too long, but I want to congratulate my friend and the member from St Austell and Newquay for securing this debate. He was right to mention shared prosperity funds and others that recognises the particular challenges that Cornwall faces, but these funds don't pay to deliver rural services, which is why it's good to have this money, and it's absolutely right that we have it, but we also need to recognise the money that councils get to deliver services. Also, my member, the member for St Austell and Newquay talked about the sheer cost of delivering adult social care. When you live in an area where low incomes are usually often the norm, people don't have huge amounts of money. They certainly don't have money sitting in the bank. When they get to an age where they need social care, it is right then that the council steps in. So as an older population with quite a lot of deprivation, it's obvious that the council will have to step in more ways maybe than elsewhere. Cornwall Council and the Isles of Scilly have been historically underfunded for years. Urban councils, we know, will receive 37% more in government-funded spending power per head compared to Cornwall Council. As a result of years of underfunding, rural councils such as Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly have had to increase council tax to balance the books, resulting in rural residents now paying on average 20% more than urban areas. And this is particularly challenging, as I said, for an area where we actually earn our wages are about a third less than the UK English average. And we've heard, as the members from St Austell and Newquay said, that Cornwall Council services cost more to deliver because of our rurality and because of our coastal stretch. So I agree with everything the member from St Austell and Newquay has said, but also the member for Truro and Falmouth. And what we need is for the government has not applied the fair funding formula. And that's a real crux of what we're talking about here. As we've heard, in 2016, the government accepted the challenge, accepted that it costs more to deliver rural services, accepted that the fair funding should be delivered across all local authorities, but the government has not applied that in full because of damping and concerns about taking money from urban areas. So will the Treasury Minister please speak to the local government minister and encourage him to use the Rural Service Delivery Grant to make up the shortfall? That is really the tool that the government introduced by not delivering the fair funding formula. They introduced a Rural Service Delivery Grant to try and address some of the shortchanging that Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly and others have faced. And so if the one thing the Minister could take away from here, from the brilliant points that we've made so far, is to use the Rural Service Delivery Grant to address this shortfall until we can deliver fair funding formula in full. And the reason I say this is because in an urban area, predominantly urban constituency, they will receive £312 per head from central government. Cornwall will receive £244 per head. That difference is a real difference on every life, living and seeking to raise a family, seeking to make the most of their lives, living in an area like Cornwall and on Scilly. As I say, in 2016, the government accepted the challenge, recognised that it delivered more to deliver service in rural areas, recognised that rural areas had not been funded in the same way. Because this government has not applied the fair funding formula in full, Cornwall Council and the Isles of Scilly has been underfunded for years. The reality is that Cornwall Council now has £77 less per head to deliver services that are vital to every person in our constituencies than an urban authority will have. So will the Treasury Minister please take all that's been said back to Treasury and back to the local government department and deliver for the people of Cornwall and for the people of Isles of Scilly what is only fair? That's all we're asking this evening. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Minister, Gareth.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, let me first congratulate my honourable friend for St Austell and Newquay for securing this debate. He is undoubtedly a strong advocate for his corner of the country and for his constituents, and I can think of few greater champions of Cornwall than my honourable friend, but also our honourable friends for St Ives and Truro Falmouth, and particularly better advocates for the funding of public services in Cornwall. I very much value my honourable friends' contributions, knowledge and insights on the local issues that they have outlined today, and I will do my best to address some of the specific concerns tonight. So first to government, local government finance, Mr Deputy Speaker, I certainly recognise that inflation is higher than when budgets were set at the last spending review in 2021. This is true actually on a global scale, and it presents challenges, as we know, throughout the world and of course throughout our constituencies and communities. Reliable, high-quality public services always matter, but I think they mean even more to us in challenging times such as these, and in dispersed populations and rural and coastal areas where your nearest neighbour might be half a mile away, and this can be a real lifeline to them. So the government is working to make sure that those services are well funded. The provisional 2024 to 25 local government finance settlement does make up to £64.1 billion available to local governments, and this is an increase in core spending power of up to almost £4 billion on just last year. In Cornwall, this has resulted in an almost 7% increase, actually, in core spending power. My honourable friends for St Austell and Newquay and St Ives have pointed out to the Rural Services Delivery Grant, which is now £95 million, which is the highest it's ever been. It's a fund distributed to the top quartile of authorities, ranked by super sparsity, but I take their point in terms of its scale, and I would be very happy to take that away to my colleagues at DLUG. Mr Deputy Speaker, I know that our coastal communities in particular are vital to the UK's economic and environmental well-being, as well as home to hundreds of thousands of people, but they do, of course, as my honourable friend has pointed out, face very particular challenges. That's why we've supported so many places along our coast, from the beaches of Cornwall to the bays of Stornoway. 11 of the 12 free ports across the UK are based in coastal areas, with each receiving up to £26 million in government funding over the next few years, as well as potentially hundreds of millions of pounds in locally retained business rates to upgrade local infrastructure and stimulate regeneration across coastal communities. My honourable friends have mentioned the UK's Shared Prosperity Fund tonight. I recognise and of course commend my honourable friend for his specific advocacy for the fund, which has supported so many of our coastal communities and provides, as he says, a significant £132 million to Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, reflecting their share of previous European structural funds. Now, local leaders are already using this to deliver ambitious plans for what they call good growth, while the government has allocated almost £100 million to the Towns and Future High Streets Fund to support Cornwall's council's ambitions to encourage more economic regeneration and strengthen pride in place. I know my honourable friend would like more certainty, as he's asked for tonight, on the future of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and while I hope he can understand that I can't give it to him right now, I do recognise the enthusiasm from his council to build on the strong start it's made, and I know he'll continue to be a very strong advocate on behalf of them in this place. Mr Deputy Speaker, recognising the importance of transportation in rural areas like Cornwall to help boost productivity, we've also committed some £32.5 million to local highways maintenance and funding potholes. And we went further recently in the spring budget just last year with an extra £5 million for this endeavour. Through Network North, further funding has been committed to Cornwall, totalling £3.6 million in both 2023 and 2024, with later allocations still to be determined. And it's not just Cornwall's roads that we're funding. Last year we awarded Cornwall Council £50 million from the Levelling Up Fund for the Mid-Cornwall Metro. This transport project will provide new hourly direct train services to improve the current links between 4 of Cornwall's largest urban areas. So as well as enjoying some of the best views you can get from a train anywhere in the country, residents will be better connected to employment, education and key services. Local leaders have pushed for this metro service and the government is happy, very happy, to support it. It's because this government is committed to giving more power to local leaders, who after all know their needs of their areas almost as well as the local MPs. To that end, the recent Level 2 devolution deal for Cornwall, announced at the autumn statement of 2023, provides Cornwall with new funding and powers to support local services. This will help Cornwall to maintain the skills local people need and help bring clean energy to the region's shores. There were initially discussions, as my honourable friend pointed out, regarding a Level 3 deal, which would have seen a directly elected mayor introduced with further powers and an investment fund. However, as he pointed out, Cornwall Council decided that a Level 2 was preferable at this point in time, and I, of course, completely respect that decision. It is, after all, local people. It is up to local people to decide and for us to support them, and that's what we have done on this deal and on other local matters of importance. He mentioned policing. Because of decisions taken by this central and local government, nationally, funding for the policing system will rise by some £842 million in 24 to 25. And this is distributed according to population sparsity. Devon and Cornwall Police will receive up to £230 million in core settlement grants. But I appreciate what he's saying about the police funding formula, and he'll know that a review was commenced in 2021, and that is continuing to carry out engagement. He may wish for it to speed up, and I know he will make representations to my colleagues at the Home Office accordingly. Mr Deputy Speaker, he also set out a great deal on the fact that many people want to call Cornwall home, and he's completely right. They don't want to just visit, they want to set up, stall and raise a family, and great many people have decided to do this in recent times, and demand for housing therefore is increasing from permanent and part-time residents who want to pass on by. But a lack of affordable housing is causing an acute concern here. House prices are high relative to incomes when compared nationally, and we understand that. The temporary and emergency accommodation budget has also become increasingly strained in recent years. To address this concern, the government is committed to building more affordable homes. As recommended at the spending review of 2021, we're investing £11.5 billion between 2021 and 2026 through the Affordable Homes Programme, which is the largest cash investment we've seen in a decade. I also note that Cornwall Council have been supportive of government plans to enable local authorities to increase the council tax premium on second homes by up to 100%. It's believed that this could provide £20 million of additional revenue, and there's always more to do, of course, so it's critical that we continue to have open conversations, just like we are tonight. Finally, let me address my honourable friend's comments on SEND. I can tell her that nationally the government is committed and has committed to addressing this. And at the last spending review, we committed £2.6 billion to create 30,000 new school places for young people with SEND. This should lead, it is our hope, that to fewer people having to be transported long distances, as she described, to access the right educational settings. But again, there is more to do, and I know the Department for Education, who lead on this policy area, is progressing more wholesale reforms of the SEND system. I'd be happy to have the relevant minister from the Department for Education write to her on Cornwall specifically. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I have spoken at length tonight about what we're doing for Cornwall, but let me spend just one moment and finish by recognising Cornwall's contribution to our country. Indeed, I would not be the first MP for Grantham to recognise its virtues. Were I to walk on the sandy shores of Constantine Bay, I'd be following in the very large footsteps of a certain greengrocer's daughter. Although I'm reliably informed that Watergate Bay in my honourable friend's constituency is also worth a visit. Cornwall is not just home to an incredible natural beauty, delicious pasties, irresistible ice cream and thrilling surfing. More importantly, it's home to some of the finest people our country has ever known. And while today I've listed the many facts and figures set out by this government, we should never forget that behind them are thousands of wonderful Cornish people. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, they could not be better represented by my honourable friend, who I look forward to continuing to work with long into the future.
Question is that this House to stand adjourned. Does many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Contrary, no? The ayes have it. Order, order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.